what my eyes dare to see, or the greatness I possess, endless possibility. Look in the mirror, what do I see?
Welcome to another segment of the Seek Elevation experience with yours truly, attorney Elakeisha. I am an attorney, but I will not be giving you legal advice when I talk about anything legal. I am giving you legal education. And I want you to take the education and to dig more, dig deeper, learn more. And if you do need legal advice, to hire an attorney to give it for your specific situation. But right here on Seek Elevation, I do use my experiences, my knowledge combined together, because this is where real issues and real people and real conversations take center stage. And a lot of times I lead those conversations from other individuals, and a lot of times I show up and I am delivering those conversations. But right here is where we give a stage for voice, because change doesn't happen in silence. And we'll talk about all types of empowering things for us to transition, transform from sports and entertainment to business and community. We elevate voices, and we elevate voices that definitely needs to be heard. But again, you keep hearing me say we talk, we talk, we talk. We don't just talk. We do empower, we inspire, we challenge the status quo, and I highly encourage that we also connect. You know, there's nothing greater than, there's a lot of things greater than, but this is great when you can find like-minded individuals, especially in our times, when you can find individuals that have similar interest, similar drive, and you can connect with them and you can learn from each other, because we all bring our uniqueness into everything. We all have our unique experiences, which shapes our unique perspectives. But when we have that commonality of whatever it may be, and we bring our uniqueness together within that commonality, that's where change happens. And so I encourage to connect through Seek Elevation. What are we doing today? Woo, we are on the back stretch. We ran a 400-meter race. We went through the first 3 laps already, and we are now on the back stretch. This is the final segment, segment 4 of the NIL era in college sports 4-part series. Segment 1, we talked about the foundation of name, image, and likeness. That's what NIL is. Name, image, and likeness in college sports. We talked about the foundation of it. And then we moved on from the foundation to pretty much the framing of name, image, and likeness. And then last week, we talked about the house settlement. So we went from foundation framing to building the house. And this segment, wrapping it all up, we're going to talk about now owning it. Owning what has been built. And when I say owning it, I mean on different levels. Owning it, truly understanding what ownership means and how that can apply in this era for college sports, but also owning it, meaning that you take accountability for your actions, and your knowledge, right? We have to own it. I don't care what side you are on, whether you're the athlete, someone supporting the athlete, you have to own being competent. And that has been the theme throughout. We already know control is going to already, it's there. It's been there. It's there. Um, but competency, not so much. So we need to own it as ownership, and we need to own it as having accountability and positioning ourselves to move in this era correctly, because there is no rewinding. We're not going backwards. Where we're going to end up landing, not sure, but you can put yourself in a position to be prepared for wherever that is, or better prepared for wherever that is. So, if you know anyone that's in the NIL space other than yourself, if you know parents, coaches, athletes, anybody that needs to hear this, please share it with them and let them know that it's 4 parts. If you are just tuning in today, just follow along with what we're talking about. But if there's something that you do not understand, go back and listen to 1, 2, and 3, because they all build upon each other. So let's go. Let's go ahead and get ready to get started. I know I do have a lot of adult learners, and we know that attention, especially when we talk about certain topics, um, attention span, we have to cater to that. And I want no excuses. So I did mention in the beginning that I am an attorney, but delivering this conversation to you all is not just from the perspective of an attorney at all. It is also from the perspective of being a former Division I collegiate athlete at a Power 5 school, a coach, an elite athlete, all those things. So I get it. I really, really do. All right, so let's jump in. Before I do, though, if you're following me on any social media platform, well, really IG and LinkedIn, I believe, I just post something yesterday. It's an issue that the College Sports Commissioner, NCAA, and NIL Go is having right now. And that's going to also be a common theme in this NIL era, is as things are pushed for, it just appears that they're not always thought through all the way, or possibly they thought through to the edge as far as one mind can perceive. And it may take a situation in order to say, ooh, we didn't make provision for that. Now it has stretched our edge. Our edge is no longer here. It has moved all the way out. Well, that is the case. So I mentioned the NIL Go last segment, and that is the entity. Well, Deloitte is the entity, but NIL Go is what they have established as the check and balances for these NIL deals. And any NIL deal that is worth $600 or more triggers it to be checked by the NIL Go. So yes, you have to inform your college and all that good stuff of these deals, but NIL Go is a separate creation of checking through these deals to make sure that they adhere to the standards, especially not being pay for play, making sure they're fair market value. And that's if the contract, the deal was created or involves an associated entity or individual. If it doesn't involve an associated entity or individual, then it still has to be reported to NIL Go, but not necessarily go through all of the checks and balances. An example of an associated entity or individual is a college collective and some booster clubs. So that is associated. So most of these deals that were curated especially with all the collectives that were put together. And I talked about that in a previous segment. Was put together. A lot of these NIL deals were identified or created through these collectives. So a lot of these contracts not only had to be reported, but had to go through these checks and balances through NIL Go. Well, the issue there is $600 is not a lot. So even if some athletes in different sports were struggling to get NIL deals, right? Because a lot of people say, well, just depend on the sport. More than likely, a revenue generating sport, those athletes who shine are going to get those very, very, very lucrative deals, especially monetarily, even if they're not a complete shine, if they're part of them sports, those particular sports. Well, there's a lot of different athletes that got lucrative deals in different sports. However, lucrative, that's subjective, right? But I can say maybe $600 is not. I think $600 you're able to get. And so when you're thinking about these athletes who get these deals and they're getting them for $600 or more across various sports, and that triggers the check through NIL Go, you have to think about that may be a lot of deals. A lot of deals. And mind you, it has to go through the check in order to get approved. So if a contract or a deal is not approved, the athlete and the third party can't move forward on whatever that contractual agreement is. You're waiting to get the thumbs up. So you see where I'm going, I hope. You have all of these contracts that were already established, ones that were being established, triggering this process. And the college sports commissioner, that third party entity was just put together. Deloitte's over NIL Go, but that was just put together. Deloitte did something totally, other stuff. Manpower. How was it going to be possible to check all these contracts that triggered the $600 minimum, that was curated or identified, involved, an associated individual or entity within a timely fashion? If it wasn't a whole bunch of people, a big, big team, you had the supply and demand seemed like it was off, right? Supplying these contracts or demanding these contracts and supplying the human power. And that is exactly what the issue is now. You have contracts that are in what they call purgatory. There were reported at least 5,000 contracts that have been cleared. Sounds like a lot, but that's a drop in the bucket when you think about how many contracts actually had to be submitted. And we got football season right upon us, right? And a lot of times when you are a corporation, a business, anyone who's identifying that I want to use this name, image, and likeness for my benefit, a lot of times you're going to do that, especially when the season is going to kick in for that particular sport. And you want it to be done when that season is there. You can ride on that hype. Well, when you have contracts sitting, waiting to be approved, and a season about to approach, there's a problem. And that problem is called the possibility of lost opportunity. Because if you cannot deliver to me what I sign up for, then I have to move on to the next. So that has to get fixed. not sure what they're doing in the meantime to get it fixed. One of the things I did mention in my post was, what about AI, right? We're all talking about artificial intelligence, large language models, things that we're using now. And I do present on that. Uh, I present educational panels and things and talk about AI and the law. And of course, when you use it responsibly and we really understand it, it's a useful tool, very useful, one that I use as long as you understand it and use it responsibly. So I said, well, what about AI helping in this? How is there a way to train artificial intelligence to help with these contracts? And then my second thought was, and how do you make provision for any biases though? Because that was already going to be an issue when we're looking at one of the reasons to not approve the contract was for fair market value. The question was, how are you determining that? Yes, they did mention that they're going to look at all contracts and athletes that are similarly situated in talent and sport, but that's still that's maybe a starting ground. If I'm a corporation and, for instance, I see an athlete that is similarly situated as another athlete, same sport and all that, it may be some other reason that I want to offer this particular athlete more. It could be something that is an amazing fit with my company, with this athlete that tells the story the way I need the story to be told. It have nothing to do with all the other stuff. That other stuff was the reason why I may have been attracted to the athlete, but to really solidify this deal is because this story, my purpose can only be told or shown the way I wanted to for this athlete. So how does that fit into the equation of fair market value? So it's already some subjectivity that we're dealing with there when we're looking at these contracts and deciding what to approve and not approve, but that's something to think about. Because if they don't get this together and we start hearing more situations about lost opportunity, guarantee we're going to hear a lot more lawsuits. There's more lawsuits in the pipeline. So we're already dealing with Title IX. We're already dealing with employee, employer. We're already dealing with those things. And now it may be added on here that wasn't foreseen, but probably should have been. I'm losing opportunity because of this process that you all put in place that I have to adhere to. So, something to think about. And I wanted to put that on your radar because competency, right? That's our theme of this 4-part segment. Is something I'm giving you a nugget to say, let me go look more into this so I can be prepared for that, whatever side of the NIL situation that you're on. So, where does NIL go from here, from the House settlement that we actually talked about? Well, remember we talked about federal law. And if federal law pass, these are things I want you to think. I'm gonna mention these things, and I want you to really, I hope you're jotting them down, or if you have great memory, log it in your memory. But where are we going? I want you to think about federal law. We are looking at that. We're looking at the SCORE Act that was presented. We talked about that in a previous segment. We have executive order in place right now until that can pass. Remember, we talked about the federal law. It's on the House floor. Nothing's going to be done yet until they resume in fall to see where that goes. If it passed the House, and it has to go through the Senate, but we don't know how far it's going to go. But let's just say this federal law passes, and if it does, that means we're dealing with NIL and uniform standards. Because remember, we're dealing state by state now. And with that, we're dealing with some states whose law was repealed, meaning it stood for a certain amount of time and it ended at a time. It gave a reason or a date of when it would end. And for some states, it reached that reason or date, including Georgia, where I'm at. It reached that. So if federal law passed, we'll have these uniform standards. If we have these uniform standards, which is something I strongly am a proponent for. I do want it. The only thing that I'm on the edge of my seat about when we talk about federal laws for the NIL is what is actually going to pass. what has been marked up from the original submission of this federal law, what has been marked up, what needs to be changed, what's going to be kept. How will it land? Will it land to where it puts an extreme amount of control in one hand and we still end up back, where we started? Or is it something that is a win-win across the board? That's the only thing I'm concerned about. But I definitely am one of the proponents for federal law because it would make all of our lives easier if there are uniform standards. Secondly, when we talk about federal law, especially when it comes to legal representation, it makes our lives easier because now, unless you are barred in all 50 states and all that good stuff, with federal law, you can represent these athletes because you're representing based on a federal law. If a state, it has to be a state in which you are licensed, and you may have to just deal with so many different attorneys if you're not licensed there. So I want it for that reason too. And also, when it was state laws, federal law, I said I don't want it consolidated, all the power consolidated in one hand. But when it was state laws, it was so all over the place, which we talked about. Different states just were different. Some could be strict, some could be lenient. Like I said, some didn't even deal with it at all. And you literally can have an athlete go from college to college and cross state lines and have to think about something totally different than where they were at before. I mean, I don't want to still be there for the sake of the athletes and the coaches and the supporters of the athletes. So we'll have a national oversight body if federal law passes, and I'm all for it. If NIL remains in the hands of the state, I strongly believe we will continue to see patchwork of policies because I don't see each state being uniform. It wasn't to begin with. It is not like these state legislators got together and said, what are you going to do? You're going to do, you're going to do. Okay, let's all try to figure out, make it look, let's mirror each other. That didn't happen. I don't see that. That's not going to happen. Right. So we'll still see these patchwork of policies where now athletes and their supporters will have to understand the state laws in which college they are interested in attending. They have to really understand that. Again, depending on what the federal law look like, it could be an advantage to keep it state then. So that way it's not all power consolidated in one hand. I mean, we figure out the patchwork policies, more work, more study, more understanding. Okay, it is what it is. So maybe, that's advantage to look at. But there can also be disadvantages, again, solely based on the geography. And for some schools, they felt that was very hard too, competing, right? Like it was like depending on the state, we feel like this state or this school may be more attractive to an athlete because of the totality of the situation, where ours may be less attractive because of the totality of the situation, but it may be the best fit for the athlete when it comes to their athletic talent or even maybe their interests academically. But we can't compete with this other state based on everything else. So they may gain more opportunities in our other state, and they're just solely focused on the opportunities. So that's what happened if it's in state hands. So pay attention. So federal law, state hands. And then we also have to look at this House settlement. We know dealing with this House settlement, we're at least looking at the next 10 years. So all of the terms that were agreed to in the House settlement, and although they have to flush them out, such as the NIL goal that I just mentioned, and some other issues, which ties into the federal versus the state, with this House settlement, if it remains in the state hands, then although the plaintiff attorneys, the student athletes that represented this class action for all of the Power 5 schools, Power 5 conferences, and all of the colleges, Division I colleges that decided to opt in, because the House settlement was really applied to the defendants of this case, which is the NCAA, of course, and the Power 5 conferences. But if any Division I school decided to opt in, then they can get benefit from the House settlement, certain benefits from the House settlement terms. So if the state end up keeping control, then some of these terms are going to be litigated. They're going to be fought. Again, we talked about the Title IX. There's things that's going to be a consistent issue. What has happened is that there is a contract that was circulated amongst these institutions to be signed if they're going to opt in with the House settlement or automatically going to be bound to the House settlement, that they cannot be sued. The College Sports Commissioner cannot be sued for enforcing the terms of the House settlement. And the reason why that draft contract was circulated and being reviewed, and I'm not sure if they finalized it yet, but that is what was put out there on the table, was because if it remains in the state hands, then the state can push, people can push against some of these terms through the states, and they don't want to be sued. But if it's federal, federal already addressed some of these issues. They already addressed that they're empowering uh, the governmental forces when it comes to the Title IX. They're demanding to finally resolve this employee-employer issue. So if it goes to federal, that also helps House. State may hurt House. Federal will more than likely help the House settlement terms. But we know for the next 10 years, we're dealing with the terms of House settlement. So those are three things that you really need to have on the top of your list if you're in this NIL space, is saying, hey, I need to follow and make sure I understand if federal law is going to take over or if it's going to remain in state hands. And if so, I already know this House settlement is, bound to these institutions for 10 years, and that can possibly look different for my athlete, or if I'm the athlete for myself, depending on where it's going. So we're at a very, very a point of a lot of tension. But this is a great point for you to dig in and to actually get ahead, right? There's a difference between access and accountability and potential and preparation. And the difference between those two is competency. As long as you're competent and you start understanding this. Well, speaking of which, good segue to this whole educating, the athletes, right? So we know the athletes are at the center of NIL. And this has been a while, but many are still, underinformed about how to navigate it. So what about pay? Right? What about how do you look at how should my athlete get paid? Or the athlete, how should I look at getting paid? If, first of all, they do have relationships with other individuals at those schools that have been around them, that have either went through the system and graduated, or there and they're willing to just share. Although things are case by case, it's good to just be informed, right? At least if you have no knowledge at all, to get some type of information. But just start flushing out, what is your value add based on that particular deal? What is your value add? And then you can curate your value ask. I say look at hiring people as well. Yes, you may get an agent, and even right now, right, especially through the House settlement, the institutions themselves can now offer these NIL deals. They can share through revenue. They have a cap of how much they can share out, but they can offer these NIL deals. I don't care if it's the school or third party. You have to have the right conversations. The only way to start with the right conversation is understanding your value add, and then you can put out your value ask, but also build teams around you. Even though the schools can provide some type of support with NIL deals, what I always advise individuals is you want somebody on the outside, right? This is in every area. So me, as an attorney who also deal with creatives, like individuals in entertainment industry, especially when it comes to, like, say, music, you'll have some individuals that will sign deals and be in the boardroom with the label that they're signing with, and there'll be an attorney there that's supposed to explain and guide and all that. And what I always tell them is, who brought the attorney to the table? That's whose best interest is in mind. When it comes to legal, right? One of our duties, our ethical duties, is to provide, of course, the best representation, meaning, competent, but also have our clients' best interests in mind. Have our clients' best interests in mind. There's no way I can have anyone else interest in mind if it conflicts or is slightly in any way different than my clients, because I have to have my client's best interest, not better. So whoever brings me to the table, my client, that's who best interest I have in mind. There's times my client may say, okay, I want what this person is saying or whatever, and that may end up being, a great interest for the other party. But that's because that was my client's best interest. It's the same thing. I tell entertainers, don't say, oh, a lawyer was there. A lawyer was there. A lawyer may even talk to you about the situation. Prior to talking to you, the conversation was with who the client is and what their best interest is. It's the same thing here. So although you have individuals that say they can guide you or talk to you, if they're representing a separate entity, we clearly see that, right? Because we see the court cases. It's not like the institutions are standing on the side of the athletes. Institutions are standing, conferences are standing with NCAA. They're always on the opposite side here. So yes, it's great that they're told you have to do these things to guide or whatever, but at the end of the day, the best interest of whoever that individual is representing has to be who they work for. So this is why I tell athletes, even when you're dealing with your institution, oh, they have the departments, they could tell me that. That's great. But you have to build your own toolkit as well. Get these teams. And so some people may say, well, what does that look like? How do I hire these outside teams? Because you're right. There's so many people. You have agents or whoever you may hire, maybe hiring from, all one fees and percentages and all that. Well, because you stepped into this game, you have to know how to just ask. I mean, you get no's, whatever, but you have to know to ask what is fitting for your situation. Some negotiate fees. Some people fees are non-negotiable. Ask if there is an opportunity for flat fees versus if some professions offer hourly fees. Ask if there are contingency fees, meaning I pay when this comes in, like it's contingent upon landing this situation, and your fee is tied to landing this situation. Outside of asking how to navigate hiring someone in their specialties, also have the conversations of what is the fee for. As you're hiring a team, you want to make sure you're adding value to your team. These individuals that you are hiring, they think of them like partners in your business. This is your business. You're bringing on partners. You're bringing on investors. You're going to identify partners or investors in any regular business the same way you would do here. How does this partner or investor add value to me? And it has to be beyond a title. The role may get you to who you actually identify, but then that conversation has to go deeper. What is your fee for? How is that value add? So you want to ask those specific questions as you're building your team. So it is possible to build a team. You have to ask. You can't just say, okay, an accountant, I need that, and it's this. An attorney is that, and I need this. An agent is that, and I need this. Oh, but I can't afford it. You have to say, I need these things. These are things I need. First of all, prioritize what you actually need. Then say, I'm going to identify individuals in this area, and then I'm going to have the conversation that needs to be had with these individuals in the area. And whoever's a fit for you is a fit. Some may say yes, some may say no. Like for me, for instance, my fees are non-negotiable. So I'm not negotiating fees, but for some they may. But for me, I don't do hourly. I do flat. So there's a lot of different things there. You have to find who is a fit for you, but you need to find that fit. in the direction that we go. We need to find that fit and not depend on one lane, nor should athletes depend on just their institution um, itself. So next, we're shifting to ownership, right? That I mentioned earlier. We're not, it seems like this conversation, it's not even going to say it seems like this conversation, if we're all going to be honest, who's listening and who's a part of the NIL space, the conversation is centered around profit. That's what is bottom line. It's centered around profit. We have some outliers, but we're really focusing on profit. And I don't care what side you're on. We're focusing on profit when it's an athlete. And I want to get an idea. I can make some money. If someone's supporting it, well, I want to land an athlete that we can make some money. So it's always around profit. But all sides can win when it comes to even ownership. We all need to be thinking about, the longevity of the situation, not just the knockoff of the deal. So it's not just about profit, but it's about positioning. So as we continue to shift here, more so when things are laid out, the way they're laid out, a little more clear, let's shift our mind from thinking about profit to positioning an athlete, positioning yourself, and really make sure that the athlete understands this trajectory and not to get distracted by all the other stuff. Like, this is a huge deal. Not just, again, keep repeating this, not just because we make a lot of money. This is a huge deal. This can be life changing for everybody. And so, what are some of the conversations that you should have with these athletes when we're talking about trajectory? And even thinking about for yourself, especially if these things are not in order right now and you're dealing with athletes. You have to start thinking about what it says, name, image, and likeness, right? That's what we're talking about. More so, feel new in this space, but always been. I mentioned that before. Well, what about protecting it at the highest level? What about protecting your name, image, and likeness at the highest level? All right. Federal trademarking it. Why does that matter? For so many reasons. If we're talking about NIL deals and we're talking about especially getting paid for them, one, you protect it to make sure this is yours and you control it. But the licensing conversation change. If someone comes to me, like, you're adding value to things. If someone comes to me and want to have this negotiation about how much money they get and all the things, I'm going to look at the value of what they're putting in front of me. If it's that much value in it, I'm going to counteract whatever was put in front of me and renegotiate and push back. No. This is the value I'm getting from that. If I could get more value myself, then yeah, I'll pay into that. Well, when you're federally trademarking and you put that R behind that name, image, and likeness of whatever represents that athlete's particular brand, it's a different licensing conversation. They're dealing with something that adds more value because we know it's federally protected. And it literally shows that I'm absolutely serious about putting my name, image, and likeness on whatever you want me to promote. You're literally getting something that is not just out there, right? It's not just tied to talent, but you're getting something that understands the business market. So it just levels up the conversation. Another thing about ownership, think about having these conversations with your athletes on forming business entities. Forming these business entities, again, for several reasons, to show the seriousness of it. A lot of times it would help, right, to have these business entities, and a business entity is actually loaning out this talent and not the transaction being between athlete and entity, business entity, but business entity to business entity have conversation and then they loan these athletes out. It's a different level of ownership. Not to mention, it can manage income. Me getting income as an individual versus my business getting an income is two different conversations. And that's where you need to bring a tax attorney or a CPA on board as well. But if you're talking about shifting from just thinking about making money to positioning yourself in these conversations or your athlete in these conversations, these are the things to think about. Again, not just athletes, but anyone supporting. If you have not federally protected or trademark your front facing brand as well, that's something you need to do, right? If you're going to have these conversations with athletes, you have to have these conversations by leading first, being the example, and showing them I am about what I talk about. Hopefully, most of you are definitely forming business entities for an additional reason, liability. You're opening yourself up to uh, representing these different athletes, putting yourself out there. Then you want to go ahead and make sure that you are doing so through your business. You know, you're signing contracts. Think about how you are signing those contracts. First of all, we talk about the athletes. Well, the athletes, business is business signing it. That helps them as far as liabilities or, you know, how much that they'll be responsible for and being protected, limited in their liability. And then you too, how you're signing contracts. But also just having, speaking of contracts, having contracts that align with long-term careers. I mean, everyone's pushing. I get it. Hey, come with me. I got this incubator. We're going to sign this. We're going to go all these deals and they're ready. It's great. Take advantage of the opportunities there, but slow down when you get in front of the opportunity. Don't rush or feel rush when people are rushing. Okay. What opportunities do you have? Ask the right questions. You get the right answer. Asking the right questions is what helps you elevate, not just asking questions or asking or not asking questions. Asking questions doesn't necessarily help you elevate, no more than not asking questions. Asking the right questions is what do. So you have these contracts and these contracts that's put in front of you, you know, look through these terms. Are there terms that help you with your long-term vision? Um, if not, are those some things you can negotiate in there? It doesn't have, I'm not saying that the contract has to be long term. What you are gaining from that contract, what you want to negotiate, is going to help you in your long-term career plans. So look at that stuff. And again, I touched on this a little bit. Plan for these taxes. That's one of the most quiet issues that have been talked about. There's a lot of issues that came to the forefront dealing with this, the NIL, right? That people had to learn on the fly and had to adjust. One that's not talked about so much is the tax issue that people just did not understand. You get paid. I don't care if it's in kind, monetary. There's different things that can trigger your tax liability. And people did not know that. And so planning for taxes, and again, that goes back to what I just said earlier about you know, possibly establishing a business to have that conversation, because you have to think about, is this a hobby? Is this something that is actually a business I take serious? And I also expend money. I have expenses that are related to my business, right? That pushes and promotes my business. So those are conversations that needs to be had. Now, I mentioned last segment that I was going to just talk about a few example of athletes that is thinking along the lines that I just talked about. Thinking along the lines of, it's not just being profited, but it's being positioned. Positioning that probably wouldn't have otherwise been an opportunity before. And understanding that I'm not going to play for the rest of my life. So this isn't a conversation even about, I may not make it to the league in whatever sport. I may not make it to the elite level. That's not it. I don't care. Even if you make it to the elite level, even if you know you're that talented, the one outcome that's universal for everyone, no matter their talent, no matter if they're making it to league, making it to the pro levels, whatever it is, the one conversation that's universal is that you will not play for your whole entire life. And even if you make it to the pro level, injury can happen, a lot of things can happen. So you want to be thinking about, wow, this is an opportunity to set me up. This is an opportunity to build relationships. This is an opportunity to show my talents off the court, off the field, off the track, off the course. This is my opportunity to show that I may not have otherwise had. Um, but I've got some few individuals that I will share, and you can look more into them. I mentioned in the last segment that I was going to share Shador Sanders, and I know some people will say, "Well, he have his father around him that understands all this, and also may help as far as his positioning." But one thing I could also tell you too, as a parent, it doesn't matter what you know, what you can do, or how you put some position you put somebody in. It's still up to that individual to take it and do something with it and to stand in it. Right. So Shador, he's definitely built a carefully curated personal brand. We can see that. And it's arguably, or I may say inarguably, but arguably, some ways will say that personal brand that he has built has ruffled some feathers to the point where people were shocked with the NFL draft and thought it should go here, there, but it was a point being made. Either way, I for me with him in that, um, my understanding, the reason why to even want to get drafted higher is because it just opens up more opportunities. You talk about that rookie contract, it can affect a lot of different things. But when you have someone like him, I mean, when you have NIL that have opened up now, because that all really was a big deal when they weren't getting paid for their name, image, and likeness, right? But now when you have that open up, uh, unless someone can put in the comments how that's punitive, I don't get it. NIL opened up and he positioned himself with that. So that the reasonings of wanting to be all the way up there, all the perks that come with that, he's in a good spot. He can really play because he loves the sport and not have to depend on it for anything else. But he definitely curated his brand. He focused on his athletic talent. He always appeared to stand in his personal values. He landed so many different type of endorsement brands with Beats by Dre, Gatorade, the Brady brand. Uh, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in my education and knowledge, you're talking about Tom Brady. He didn't go first. I mean, this was when not even NIL was out there, and he did. It didn't matter to where he went when he was picked in the rounds. What he showed up and did afterwards changed all that, anyways. But I digress. But he got all these deals, and when he got these deals, he definitely chose partnerships that strengthened his image. He knew what his image is, nothing that was going to compromise his image, um, nothing that didn't align with his type of values or future ambitions. So that's what you call ownership. Not taking every deal that comes in front of you. If you're focused on profit, a lot of times that will happen. You're focused on profit. You're looking at the numbers and you're going to take whatever comes in front of you. You're going to hear individuals say, "Oh, I got all these deals. Come with me if you want deals." You're going to go everywhere that someone says that. But if you're focused on positioning, then you're going to really take your time to see what deals strengthens and aligns with your future ambitions because you're looking at positioning. But he definitely, because he did all of that, his type of earnings and things that he did, he managed that strategically. And he did so, and he's said this before, to make sure that all of this outlives his playing days. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? He maintains creative control that has been made known. I maintain creative control. A lot of times these athletes are entering into these contracts and they're losing creative control over your deal. Well, I know if you're already serious about what I just told you earlier, looking into uh, federally protecting and registering, all of that good stuff, you're already going to be serious about your image, your brand. They're going to see you're serious, and you're going to make sure you look at those type of terms so that way you can maintain creative control in your brand and in your image period. So yeah, he's definitely turned down a lot of different deals and aligned with whatever is going to go for him. Trevor Lawrence, another individual, um, someone who was more focused on the financial aspect of it, already was into, finance as a interest, as a business interest anyway. He had financial discipline from the start. When he looked at NIL deals, he looked at opportunity of opening doors, being able to choose opportunities that would help him on the financial side, right? Looking at approaching his team, looking at, hey, what are some wealth management opportunities, for me? He also had deals with Gatorade and Blockfolio, looking at investments, and they were strategically chosen and professionally managed. And he put the people around him when you're talking about financial position and him wanting to be in a great financial position and in finance. He worked closely with financial professionals and made deliberate choices to prioritize his stability over all of the flash. But his mindset was already there, right? His mindset, all right, I understand financial discipline, but I'm going to use this to step into an arena where I can show my financial discipline. So understanding ownership, again, understanding positioning over profit. The Cavendish twins, Hannah and Haley. I watched a lot with these two young ladies. Very bright and driven young ladies. And I would say, look them up. And I added them in here so we don't have these conversations just about like, football or Deion Sanders. This applies, this again is equal opportunity when it comes to the mindset. Where it's not equal is if you don't know. But once you do know, you can now shift your mindset to say, this is how I'm approaching NIL. And this is the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. So we can know. And this is why you're going to share so more people can know and we can shift our mindset. But you have these twins and they started out with getting these collegiate NIL deals. And they always said, if you watch all of their interviews and things they talked about, they always said they had in mind, especially when it's opened, these opportunities open, to build a 40-year strategic plan. You have these young girls talking about, we just had this ideal of building, a 40-year strategic plan. And we have this plan. That's what we wanted to focus on. And we knew securing NIL deals can funnel right into that. And of course, they got great people around them too. They talk about that. They said, we knew that we had to surround ourselves and put people in positions that understood the things that we didn't understand. Very smart. Like, this is not the same thing I'm saying. We put people around us that understand the things we don't understand. We understand the playing, we understand this, but we don't understand the other things that can help us build in our 40-year strategic plan with these opportunities that we have in front of us. And so they put those individuals around them. And for them, it was definitely more than just about profit, right? Their conversations didn't stop at how much am I going to get for this NIL deal. They start having conversations about equity. And so those are some of the conversations too, especially again, when you build more leverage, then it allows you to have, it expands your conversations, expands your negotiating power, it expands everything. And equity is great because if you're paying me and we're one and done, and it may sound good. I don't care even when someone says I give you this multi-million dollar deal. First of all, as soon as you give it to me, money depreciates. I pay these taxes, all these things. But when I can get some equity, I continue to make money as long as you make money. I have a stake in this company. And as long as you're good, then I'm good. And they got equity in better media. They establish and have ownership of multiple businesses and brand extensions. That's the only thing that can happen with licensing. If you create something and you have a federally protected brand, you can create something and license that thing out to other individuals that may already have that company established in that. So say I decide to do athletic wear. Instead of me doing all of the laborious work, I have the star power, the name, the image, the likeness, all the things behind it. And I need to license this to you who already have the company that is in place. So these Commodore twins moved beyond sports, use sports as a catapult for entrepreneurship and lifestyle. And all of these athletes, and there's more. And there's obviously some that probably are not sharing their stories, but they've demonstrated how, athletes can literally graduate from this ideal and over all the excitement of participating in NIL to owning, creating ownership, changing generations, elevating their generations, and ensuring that revenue and their influence goes long after their athletic careers ends. So these are the things you need to be talking about. These are the things you need to talk about if you are representing athletes. I strongly believe it will completely set you apart because I know when I have these conversations, it always seems to be brand new to them. It's like, I don't know, oh my gosh, you're just different. Become this angel. So I gave you this nugget. If you're someone that is representing these athletes, have these conversations to set yourself apart, but be truthful and honest in your walk in this conversation to help now set your athlete apart. And if you're an athlete that's listening to this, these are the ways that you should show up and lead in your conversation, because how you show up dictates how someone is going to how the rest of the conversation is going to go, what someone's going to offer you, how they want to deal with you. All that stuff is going to make a difference. So again, a winning NIL strategy is not about chasing every deal. It's about building a brand with staying power. And when we all get this, then we'll definitely go from the ideal or the mindset of get paid now to own the game later. So I had a couple of questions. Before I close out, I want to address a couple of questions that was actually sent to me. And if you're listening now, and if you have some questions, this is your time to submit it. I did allow for checks Instagram. Okay, how do athletes make sure they stay? Okay, I'm gonna get to that question. I did allow for after each segment to ask questions. You can, post it on the actual video and all that. Well, after this last segment, more than likely, I'm not going back. I'm going to continue on. I have other. It's time to bring the guests back on, and I start that immediately next week. So I will not be able to keep going back because I never know when someone, listen to this video. I will be always going back to my videos, answering questions. But as your reward for engaging and tuning in, that's what I allowed. And then even those who end up having to watch the replay, as long as it was during these 4 segments, that's what I also allowed. But after this, I'm not. So if you do have a question, make sure you put it up. So I'm gonna try to pull up all questions and get to what was actually asked here. Let me get to. All right, so I have a question here. Is joining, marketplaces or working as a marketing NIL agent legitimate ways to work without licensing? Or do I still need to be licensed in whatever state an athlete is in? So, to answer that, I know people will say, "Oh, that's the lawyer way of answering it." No, it'd be clear, but it is definitely one of those answers, though. It depends. So the reason why I say depends, well, first let me just go ahead and give you the straight out answer. And I'm talking about under Georgia law right now, if an individual is focused solely on promoting an athlete for publicity purposes without engaging in activities such as negotiating or soliciting professional sports contracts, endorsement contracts, or any other type of agreements that's tied to the athletes, then it would not necessarily fall under an athlete agent. If you're literally marketing for publicity purposes, get the athlete out there, get them known. I'm marketing you, but I'm not engaging in the activities of negotiating a contract or actually soliciting these contracts. I'm marketing you, so possibly maybe that'll help you land more eyes on you. And if it does, then an agent can take it from there or whoever can take it from there. But if you're strictly focusing on the marketing aspect, then that generally does not fall within being an agent. And you don't have to, in Georgia, get a license. And the reason why I started off with it depends is because sometimes, individuals may say that and then find themselves crossing a line from marketing, publicizing, and then all of a sudden you market, you're publicizing, someone identifies you as the one marketing this athlete. They contact you about this athlete. You end up contacting your athlete and you're talking about this deal and the next thing and next thing and next thing. And then it can cross the line of offering athlete agent services. So that's why I have to leave with it depends, because it depends on where you stand and where you lie and where you have that clear line of the service that you're going to actually provide for the athletes. And I'm going to give you a law to look up. You should be able to have access to this, not just our attorneys. We have access to a lot of different stuff in our, legal database and software. But the official code of Georgia annotated is something that you can look up online to really make sure you stay aligned with this. What I'm telling you, look up OCGA, Oscar, Charlie, George Alpha 43 4A 4. And when you look up OCGA 43 4A 4, it will talk about the certification of registration required and what some exceptions are. And in that statute, it also talks about, okay, if you started a certain way, you intended that way, then there is some grace for you to now go ahead and get fall in line. You'll have 7 days to fall in line to go ahead and register for being an agent. So I hope that helps with that. If you know you're staying strictly on marketing and nothing else, and is not directly or indirectly crossing the lines in any ways as listed in that statute, then no, you do not have to be licensed. So it depends. The next question: do you suggest I get an athlete agent license in Georgia? Well, yes, it's going to come from me. Even with that question I just had, as far as if I'm just marketing, because you're asking me, right? So I can only give you, do you have to get it if you're just marketing? That answer to that was no. What I suggested, even for someone who's just focusing on marketing, I would, just because you're asking me, that is the type of person I am, right? So just to give you an example, as an attorney who have represented potential NFL players and all that, my mindset was I'm going to go get certified. Although there's two different lines, I'm going to go get certified because I know I'm going to cross the line of agency, because I know specifically what legal is. And I knew also, when I advised from a legal perspective, I had certain doors closed, certain conversations that wouldn't be had if I didn't have a license. So that's why I got at that time. I didn't want no doors closed. I didn't want any stoppage at all. I like all cards in my hands to choose how I want to play them. That is me. Same thing with me being a closing attorney. I close on real estate deals as an attorney. But I decided to go ahead and get my sales agent license. One, and this also applies to the NFL certification. One, I increased my education. I wanted to think about it outside of a attorney perspective. I wanted to think about it like right in the heart, right on the ground with whatever I'm dealing with. So to get my NFL certification, it's a different conversation. It's a different understanding. I'm seeing it from a different perspective. We're getting my sales agent license and seeing it from an agent perspective. It's totally different. Again, I am a type of person, I like to have all cards in my hand to be able to do the things that I want to do with no limitations, to be completely educated, versed in my conversations. That's something I do. So, from a me personally, I'm going to say yes. If you're going to deal with athletes, especially from a marketing perspective, I see that can easily eventually cross the line or want to. But I would say, you know, yes, answer to that. And to do that, you will go to the Secretary of State and look up the Department of Georgia athlete agents and read all the information and requirements for Georgia's licensed athlete agents and all that good stuff. And then the applicants that's there as well. You get all the information there. So you will go there to look at that. Now, if you're dealing with other athletes in other states, you want to go and read their state law too, because they may require you. Just because you're licensed in Georgia doesn't mean you could deal with other athletes in different states. So you want to read the laws for those other states to see what their requirements are in those other states. Okay. I'm gonna get back to this question because it's gonna take longer. So let me go to another question I just seen come through on Instagram. How do athletes make sure they still control their name and image if they switch teams, schools, or organizations? Perfect. So the question was, how do athletes make sure they still control their name and image if they switch teams, schools, and organizations? That is a great reason to back up what I said earlier. If you federally protect whatever you are putting out there, it goes with you everywhere. You here when you show up, it's school to school. If you switch, it's after school. This now become whatever you federal protection. You're saying this is a source identifier. This is a source identifier of a product or service that's being offered. What do you mean by that, Ella-Keisha? Okay, so if I get, I'm trying to say what brand I want, name I wanted to say, and who I don't want to say. I don't know if I get a Tefler bag, the brand of that Tefler, everyone, you know that, like that is the brand. So if I'm going to go buy, and that brand is identifying that we're the source that produces all types of bags, purses, tote bags, all types of things. There's the source identifier, Tefler, that produces whatever this thing is. So when you federally register it, you're saying I'm taking this seriously, but you're protected with that in all 50 states. You're protected in the U.S. All 50 states plus Puerto Rico and wherever else, whatever U.S., you're protected nationally. So it's with you, it goes with you. So you're showing that. Now, that question also makes me think about another thing. And it goes into the question that was asked here. So I would deal with it here. Well, it's actually another question here. For somebody, no, it's here. What clauses are must-haves? What clauses are must-haves in an NIL representation agreement to protect the person that's representing the athlete and the athlete themselves? So let me go ahead and start with where I was going to go with that, and then I'll get into some other stuff. So even if you federally register and protect whatever you decide your source identifier is for the service you're providing or product, and yes, you can protect the name. There's a whole different things that checklist you have to go through, but it is protectable. If you sign a contract, and this is why it's important to look at the intellectual property provision, and you end up signing over rights to someone else, you can lose what you work hard to protect. So making sure you still control has a lot more to do with be careful of what you sign and what control you give up. When you're talking about licensing and using, you have to talk about, and this goes to your question about terms, like duration. What is the duration of the use of this name, image, and likeness? Is there a sunset clause? I mean, it goes down. We were talking about sunset clause with legislation. It goes down at a certain amount of time. What are the parameters, restrictions? The use is for this specific thing. Is there location? You have to get very clear on IP, intellectual property use. And the one thing you want to be clear on before you get into all this stuff is that you retain ownership in your IP. It's no different when you see any other contract. They're going to make sure they mention that. Also, institutions, you got to be very careful too, because in a lot of the policies and rules, there's certain things you can and cannot do and tie their intellectual property to your showing up in your deal and what you're doing, especially in high school. We talked about it a little bit. This is not high school segment. I may do that later. But You got to be careful of not violating any intellectual property or infringing on anybody else's intellectual property, and that needs to be in the contract. That whatever you do and they ask you to do, it cannot be an infringement on someone else's intellectual property. So don't give up your control. Know it's federally registered if that's what you so choose to do, and have parameters and guidelines on the usage. Don't just sign these deals. You have a lot of athletes who end up just finishing and they're using the name, image, and likeness in perpetuity. And to be honest with you, a lot of times that language is in the agreement that the use can be in perpetuity. So you have to hone in on how long it can be used, and if they want longer, then there's more money and there's other things that has to come into play with that. But never, ever, and make sure you do not give up control, co-ownership if possible. I'm not going to tell you what to do and not to do. I'm just saying those are things that you want to think about. And if you so choose that you want to do that, you can. But those are the things you want to be looking out for. Make sure as you're the non-athlete, if you're entering into agreement, what does breaching the contract between you and them look like? What does that mean? What is breaching the contract? What are like material reasons? Because some people say, oh, you breached a contract because you just didn't do XYZ. Well, I can tell you this. A lot of times the courts will say, yeah, they probably didn't do XYZ, but that's not material to the contract, meaning that it doesn't, it's not the core, the essence of the contract. It didn't really harm the contract as a whole. The whole thing didn't fall apart by not doing that. So a lot of times people just say, if you just didn't do this, it's a breach. Not necessarily. It has to be material. And you have to list. Don't leave it up to a court to decide what's material. List what's material to you for them to do or not do, and what would be a material breach. List in there what would actually be how a breach can be cured, not cured. Definitely make sure you have in your contract the jurisdiction that's governing your contract. If there is a breach and you do have to tackle this issue, where are you tackling that issue? In the state that you're in? Is it the courts? Is it some type of arbitration, mediation? Is it a combination of both? Have in there what's the jurisdiction and how you actually will, work on resolving these potential issues. Is the deal, and this is huge for athletes, for sure, because institutions can put this in their contracts now too. Institutions can offer these deals. Athletes can do deals with anybody now, right? As long as they're not violating a policy, right? As long as it's not violating some type of moral clause or something the school says, we don't want you tied to a tobacco company. But they can do contracts with anybody, including schools now. However, what you have to pay attention to is if there's exclusivity clause in a contract. Because if there is and you didn't pay attention to it, it doesn't matter that they can do a contract with other individuals. What's going to happen is you're going to be exclusive to the individual or entity that you're exclusive to. And the institution can put exclusivity clauses in there for you to be exclusive to them. And now you can't do third-party deals. So paying attention to being non-exclusive versus being exclusive is a huge thing to pay attention to in the contracts. And not even to mention that, right? So things are case by case, but I do want to say that in general, period, in contract law, there are things that you have to just have in a contract in order for the contract to even be enforceable. So even before we talk about what are some things that should or should not be in there, let's talk about everything that has to be in there. You have to make sure that all parties to the contract, that they're in there. That's important. Also, if you go back and go through the YouTube channel, I have a whole entire segment on contracts. Like, I try to bring it to life as much as possible, but I talk about these things, about how the difference between contracts that are drafted that can be enforceable or unenforceable. Anyways, you got to identify all parties. You have to identify the subject matter. It can't be something vague. Like, what is the subject matter of this agreement? Make it very clear and known. This thing called, what we call in the legal world, quid pro quo, this for that. What is the consideration? Consideration can be money. It could be something else, but it's a value that is being exchanged for this particular deal. Be very clear on that and give the duration, the time. Is there a specific place for whatever this performance or whatever you're asking? Those things are bottom line. And I say that because some things have been missing. These things that you have to have, this that are essential to an enforcement contract, have been missing. And unless it's a commercial contract, because we're talking about a service contract. And again, in that video, I talk about the difference between commercial and service. There's service contract. There are some things that are required for a service contract, service and product, than it is commercial. It's totally different. We're not getting into that right now. But if commercial does apply to you, I advise you to go look at that. I advise you to go look at that video. So yeah, those are some of the main things. Those are some of the main things to have in there. But again, it's going to be case by case, your athlete by athlete. Let me say this. I talked about what's in there, right? Things you know. I mentioned this, I believe, last segment. This is the difference between having someone who understands contracts and someone who doesn't, because we think about what's not in a contract. Some of the things I named would be, okay, this should be in a contract and you'll have it and all, but we have to start thinking about what's not there. And a lot of times your athlete may get contracts and you may see, ooh, ELLAvation said this, check, it's there. Ooh, she said this, check, is there. And let's pretend everything I said, check, it's there. And then you say, good contract. No, but you have to go further to think about what's not there. And we know, especially with the House settlement, it's already been said before, wasn't really enforced, but we're seeing enforcement more and more. We talked about where we're possibly going, so we're going to see more enforcement. You have to think about what's not there. Oh, can you add a provision about the exclusion of athletic performance compensation? So that way, when my athlete agreement goes to this NIL go, remember, I just talked about they already got stuff stuck. Make your contract easier to get approved. Have them put language in the contract that's saying what this contract is not going to do. That helps. So even if they're looking at a number and they think, oh, this is pay for play. No, put an exclusion of athletic performance compensation. That this agreement is not compensating the athlete for any athletic participation or achievement. This is what it's not doing. And so when you have those type of clauses in there, this maintains compliance, right? And it's acknowledging and it's being intentional of what this contract is not. So those are the things I would think about that's out of the box, right? And I will also mention that this contract is, not for, a student athlete to enroll anywhere or to transfer anywhere to a particular school. So that provision of, some type of prohibition of improper inducement. And so that's where sharp, skilled people like myself come in, right? We think about what's not there, but what's going on in the legal world. So I'm going to speak the language of my circle when it's applicable to these contracts. So that way I know I'm even helping with an issue that's right now. There's a problem. How do we help solve it? Let's start drafting these contracts to put in front of you the very thing you're looking for. I'm going to make it very easy for you. So that is that. I believe that was all Q&As that I have. I believe so. Yep. That is it. One more check on Instagram. Yep, that is it. All right. So I did finish early, on time, not early, but within the parameters that I've always presented. But I added Q&A in this last segment so they can get answered. The questions can actually get answered. So I added it in here. But so to reiterate, this the future of the NIL. It's not going to be shaped by policy and laws alone. It's going to be shaped or helped to be defined by all of us that's in the NIL space. And all of us who are in the space who are bold enough to help build these systems and not just ride the waves to see what's going to happen. We're all a part of this. So we're shaping what's going to happen and how we're going to respond and not react to what's happening or going to happen. And I mentioned ownership. That's what I'm huge on as an ownership attorney. Ownership isn't what comes, you know, just during your athlete's playing time. For you too, you're tied to these athletes. Think about yourself as far as ownership too. It comes with ownership. When I say it comes with knowing. So educate yourself. Be educated throughout this. Negotiating, stop just accepting what's in front of you. And if you're on the other side, who's signing athletes, you put things out, they may push things back. You negotiate too. How can this all work out? Understand what you're negotiating, especially if you're on the other side and you're not athletes. A lot of those individuals are not in tune. So you may have things in your contract that's going to hurt your company and your situation, not just the athlete. Ownership is also about protecting your value now so it compounds later. All of that is wide open right now for everyone to grasp. So this, you know, evolving definition of what name, image, and likeness and college sports mean, this new age of power, positioning, profit, purpose. This is NIL 2.0. And the question isn't, are you ready? It's, are you ready to own it? No matter what side that you're on. So that is a wrap. That is a wrap. That is a wrap for this last segment. I really, really enjoyed it and was in my element of empowering you all. Make sure you do share. Again, this was a very, I believe, very powerful 4 segments. We did a lot of tracing of the real story of NIL, student athletes, what that mean, amateurism. We went beyond all of these headlines. And in segment 1, we talked about from shadows to spotlight. Segment 2, we talked about cracks in the system. Segment 3, we talked about power, policy, and the players. And today we ended on ownership over opportunity. Also, all of the previous segments are on all major streaming platforms, whatever your favorite, however you like listening to podcasts is there. So if you have to listen to things and dissect it over and over again and you don't want to watch it over and over again, you don't want to see me talking to you over and over again, you can also listen to it on podcasts. But please share these video segments. Please listen and please help us be educated. And the reason why I do this, because it's my element and I love doing it, but also it helps all of us. With me being in this space, you being in this space, the more of us that are equipped and understand, it helps us all to move in the space better. If you have a question about federal trademarks, some people may say, well, maybe I can't afford attorney. Be very careful with that too. Going out there finding stuff when it comes to federal protection of your trademark or your athlete's trademark. Be very careful. But I also do have a course if you say maybe I can't afford, but I want to learn. I have a course you can learn, and that helps also where I'm going to tell you this is not simple. 4-part video, you sit and you understand it. It's not simple, but where it can help you is once you learn it, you can, and you have multiple trademarks, you can actually, it's a value that keeps paying for itself. You can do multiple trademarks for yourself. You cannot trademark for anyone else. That is against the law. You have to look it up. That is federal law. Um, Registering a federal trademark is actually a legal proceeding. So the only individuals who can register a federal trademark is you for yourself or an attorney for others. But you can learn it. You could pass it on to other individuals. How do you get that information? I will make it more publicly available soon. So if you're following me or connected to me, you'll eventually start seeing it. Only a small group knew about it, but I am going to make that publicly available this week. So follow me, connect with me, not follow me. I hate that word. Let's connect. Connect either on Instagram, and the firm is Cire de Jure, SCIREDEJURE, Cire de Jure. And that means, Cire de Jure means to know of the law. And on LinkedIn, you can connect. Just look up Ella Keisha. I'm on LinkedIn. All right. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the questions that were actually sent to me that I was able to address. So thank you so much for engaging and adding value to this awesome conversation. The more you know, the more you grow. And definitely in this case, the more you learn, the more you can earn beyond the short sighted goal, but in perpetuity. And also, when you share, you show care. Please show care and share for everyone that's moving into space because everyone's learning together. Don't keep this knowledge to yourself. Spread the wisdom. Tag a friend. Until next time, keep striving, keep growing, and most importantly, keep seeking ELLAvation, peace, and progress.